We're now standing in Battery Park. It's called Battery Park because it was the home of the battery, the artillery battery that defended the island for generations. As we were walking up, you've noticed that there's a lot of construction going on. There's a $16 million project underway to renovate the park and make it more beautiful and welcoming. And if you come back in 5 years, maybe it'll be done. You may have noticed, as I pointed out to some of you as we were walking, that there was a large gold spherical structure in the middle of the construction. That is called the Sphere. It was designed by a German designer called Franz Koenig. And it was designed in 1971, and in 1973 it was installed in Arthur Tobin Plaza between the two towers of the World Trade Center. Now, the plaza outside the original World Trade Center was never considered to be a very beautiful or welcoming place. It was designed to be that way, but it was never actually very well received. But that piece of art was always well respected and always considered to be one of the most beautiful elements of the World Trade Center. On 9/11, when the towers came down on top of it, the last thing anybody was thinking about was that structure, was that piece of artwork. And as the workers continued day and night to sift through the rubble for human remains, a couple weeks after the attacks, they found that structure intact except for a couple dents at the bottom of the pile. And it was pulled up and installed here as a temporary memorial to those who died on 9/11 with an eternal flame. Now, the renovation of the park will move the structure, will move the sphere to another location, but it is currently the only tangible memorial that is accessible completely to the public. And it will, someday there's thought that it might be reinstalled near the memorial, but they still haven't fully figured out what to do with it. Over here behind me is Castle Clinton. Now, this building was built in 1811 and it was completed just in time for the War of 1812. The War of 1812 brought both the French and the British to American soil to fight over, it's not entirely clear what they were fighting over, but they both came over here, they both fought. Now, it was built with 8-foot walls and embrasures for 28 cannons, but it was never actually used for war. Why? Because the British were too busy fighting the French further south to ever make it up and attack New York. New York was too well defended, too heavily fortified, and they never actually bothered with it. So after the war, it became a promenade, a social environment. It was a theater. And then for the last half of the 19th century, it was the main immigrant landing depot of the United States. This is where 8 million people came into this country and stepped foot in the United States for the very first time. Famous people who came through this building include Joseph Pulitzer, Nikola Tesla, and Harry Houdini. Now, when Ellis Island was built in the late 1890s, this building became the New York City Aquarium, and it served as the aquarium until the 1950s. But in 1941, Robert Moses, the innovative and yet controversial guy who built most of the bridges, tunnels, and highway infrastructure of New York City, wanted to tear it down to build a bridge connecting Battery Park in New York City and Lower Manhattan to Brooklyn, all the way over there. But there were enough people that said, no, you can't tear it down, that Robert Moses ended up building a tunnel, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, now known as the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, the entrance to which is right over there. And when we were here in February, you could see it. And that's unfortunate. Because the entrance to the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, which I will point out when we're not behind the trees, is the headquarters of the Men in Black. And Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones filmed much of the film in this park right where you're standing right now. It's now, Castle Clinton is now where you can buy tickets for the ferries to the Statue of Liberty and to Ellis Island. Now, in October 2012, just 6 months ago, Hurricane Sandy came and landed in New York. 14-foot water surges covered Lower Manhattan and all the surrounding boroughs, including Liberty Island and Ellis Island. The two islands sustained about $60 million worth of damage and are currently closed to the public. There are cruises that you can take to get near the island, but you cannot actually go on the islands until July 4th. But if you take a look behind me, you can see the islands. The beautiful woman with her arm raised, welcoming all of you to the United States, is of course the Statue of Liberty, the most famous woman in the United States in some ways. probably now second to Michelle Obama. And then the building to the right of the Statue of Liberty, the island that has what looks like a castle on it, that is Ellis Island. Ellis Island was the main immigrant landing station in the United States from the late 1890s until the 1950s. 10.5 million people stepped foot in the United States on that island for the very first time. 1/3 of the current United States population can trace their lineage to someone who came into the United States through Ellis Island. Of course, everybody who came into the United States through Ellis Island was greeted by none other than the Statue of Liberty. And she is one of the most inspiring women and one of the most inspiring stories in the United States and in New York City history. She wasn't even born here. She wasn't even conceived here. She is 100% through and through a French woman. In 1865, Russian liberalists who were inspired by the liberty and the freedom and the ideology of the United States were disheartened by the fact that it was all seeming to be coming apart after the Civil War. But yet the Civil War in the minds of the French actually brought the country back together, and the French said, in honor of the fact that the Civil War has reunited the country, we want to commend the United States and give her a gift. And it was conceived that they would build a woman of liberty, 151 feet tall, the highest statue ever built at the time. The structure that holds her up was designed by none other than Gustave Eiffel, the man who 10 years later would innovate the Eiffel Tower. The United States was like, what do we need a giant statue of a woman for? They sent the architect, the Frenchman sent the architect to the United States. He scoped out a place. He found that island that had nothing but an abandoned fort on it and said, we'll give you the statue, you provide the base. But the United States was kind of blasé. The president vetoed legislation to provide funding for the base, and it kind of just sat there. In 1886, when the statue was completed and presented to the diplomat from the United States to France, he brought it over and found that there was no place to put it. So for a year she sat in crates on that island as the fundraising campaign for the base languished. People couldn't be convinced to get behind it. What did we need a giant statue for? It was too artistic, too abstract, too French, as many people would say. Well, none other than Joseph Pulitzer got behind the cause, and he, in his newspaper, the New York World, convinced New Yorkers that this was an important addition to the United States. And sure enough, donations came in, $100,000 worth, many in donations as small as nickels and dimes from working poor who had emigrated to the United States from other countries. Sure enough, they were able to finish building the pedestal, 200 some odd feet, and now she stands 350 feet over the harbor. Unfortunately, you can't visit her right now, but after July 4th, the island and statue should be reopened to the public.